are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Exciting news. This podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, who have been telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com, and then definitely follow them on Instagram for all the information that you need, because I'm sure that's where you follow us as well, at oklahomahof. Let's get into today's episode.
Down at, I guess, the center and operations and the offices of Water4 with the president CEO Matt Hangen. Really appreciate your time. I know we've met before, and the first time that I was aware of you and what you do was at Pecha Kucha, So You Speak, which seems like a really I don't know what the word would be, but it's like quite, you're under pressure when you do those Pecha Kucha things, right? Because it's like, 20 slides?
20 slides, it has to be 2 minutes or so many seconds each, 20 seconds each or something.
That's right, yeah. Which, it's awesome.
Yeah.
But that's when I kind of saw you and saw what you do, and I kind of had a little bit of awareness about Water4, just kind of knowing in the area of, what you guys do. But for people who don't know you or don't know what Water4 is, what is it? What do you do?
Yeah. We're trying to eradicate the world's water crisis. Okay. That's the big hairy goal we've got. And we're doing that through starting local businesses in Africa and in South America that can actually solve their own water crisis. Mm-hmm. We equip them with technology and then give them business models where they can actually provide water to people at an affordable cost for folks earning $1 to $2 a day.
Yeah.
So we sort of make that the box that we work within. What's affordable, what's sustainable, and what can we do so local people can be the heroes. And not us.
And obviously, predominantly that's in Africa.
Yeah, most of our work's in Africa.
Yeah.
I work in 15 countries, 14 of which are in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, drilling wells and teaching them how to do that stuff as well.
Yeah, we started out designing our own drilling equipment and pumps, and that's kind of how we got into it, was on the technology side.
Okay.
And then, as we got the technology to people, we realized, there's a lot more mentoring and coaching. And I think a lot of people thought the problem was the pump or the tech,
Sure.
And so we'd go to places and people wouldn't have water, and we thought, let's just drill a well, and they'll have a well, and then they'll have water, and then a year later the pump would be broken and they'd be drinking out of the same stream again.
Yeah.
And so talking to people and asking those hard questions, we realized that it's a lot more, that there wasn't something there locally to maintain, repair, and keep all of those water systems working forever. And that's what we've been really passionate about.
Yeah, it's a huge issue.
Yeah.
And it's of the most simple of things, right?
And there's billions of dollars of broken pumps out there. And it's just from a stewardship mentality, if we're just going to keep putting more and more of these things that are going to break down.
Yeah.
It not only is depressing for you when you're living in a village and you got hope and then it fell away and disappeared, but also, are we just going to keep throwing our money to the wind? Or are we actually going to, dig in and try to make something that'll last?
Yeah, because I assume a lot of people see charities and see people who donate money as it's a tax write-off. They don't really, they're just sending money, right? And that's the bad side of that's the bad, you know what I mean? That's the bad thing, the bad view of charity, I guess, right? And that's what you said, there's so many pumps over there, but you guys are actually on the ground fixing the issues.
Yeah, fixing the issue behind the issues.
Yeah.
And I think most people just have good intentions, and
right.
It's sort of you drive by and you see someone that, is living on the streets or sleeping on the streets, and you think your first instinct is to pull out a 20 and give it to them. And in the moment, if that person needs food, that is still a kind, compassionate act to do.
Yeah.
But we're asking that question, why is this happening? Why is this continuing to happen? And how can we, actually ensure that, they're not on the street tomorrow or 2 months from now. And
sure.
So it's taking that approach to water development to say, what if we could create a business? What if we looked at what people could afford? And even though people are materially impoverished, they can still afford 3 cents a day.
Yeah.
And so let's design a water system that can be sustained with 3 cents a day and make that our job to figure out how to put the tech in place to do it.
Yeah.
Rather than just assume you're poor and you can't do anything for yourself.
Right.
Which nobody wants to have that assumption made
Of
about
course.
them, no matter what you are. So.
I mean, how do you get to like this position of being president CEO of a company that and we just speaking before we started recording, like if this wasn't a pandemic year, you would be on the road a lot.
Oh yeah, totally.
You're in the air a lot.
Yeah, the short story is that my board chair told me some people grow into greatness and some people are thrust into greatness, and so I grew up as a farm boy from rural Alabama. My house, until I was 6 or 7, we didn't have cabinets in our house. We had plywood floors. My parents worked really hard to sort of start from scratch and get us the opportunities that I got to have as a kid. So I never grew up thinking I'd be a CEO. It was always kind of a dirty word. You thought about these guys in suits and private jets, and I was really proudly a Carhartt guy. Like I told you earlier, I was 317 pounds of cornbread, Alabama goodness. And my story in Africa, which I'll share today, kind of allowed me to lead and learn from the people we are serving with, and build Water4's like model of doing our work, and understanding that sustainability side, understanding the people we serve, and having some management background. And a really good board of directors. I got the chance to go from sort of the field guy who was always gone in Africa and always building tools and welding, off car batteries, and doing that to being the chief operations officer, and then eventually the president and CEO. So I've been with Water4 for almost 10 years, and I feel like I've grown up here in a lot of ways.
Right. So growing up in Alabama, and did you know that like you had a pretty rough upbringing, or was it just like, no, this is all we have, this is kind of just like that's just what you knew growing up?
It is. You never know what you're in when you're in it. I eventually I got kicked out of public school when I was in 7th grade. Wasn't allowed to go back, and got put in a private school in Mobile, Alabama. It was a Christian school, and it was like the first time I'd been around like what I would consider like normal Christian families now.
Sure.
And so we weren't playing with guns that their dads had, or dragging boxes of dirty magazines out that they had in their closets, and like my neighborhood that I grew up in was a lot like what you'd find in rural America, with mobile homes and lack of appreciation for education and diversity, and so I think it was when I got in that private school I was treated differently. Like there was a pretty dramatic difference in the way that I was treated, and I hate to ask this, but I can get that welding and grinding this time.
Right. It'll be okay. Yeah,
we're at Water4. We're building tools for Africa.
Yeah.
Forgive the background.
That's all good.
But I think when I got in that environment, and all of a sudden like people were like kind in that different way, like asked about me, like affirmed me, took interest in me. And I had this 8th grade teacher in a Bible class that like asked me how I was doing and that sort of stuff. And I think that was a big shift for me as a kid. And my senior year, I actually had a pretty dramatic encounter with God, and we didn't grow up going to church. We went on Easter. It was weird. I typically wear all one color blue jeans, a neon hat, and like didn't know what to do. And had this spiritual moment where, I literally heard God say, you don't have to hurt or hurt others anymore. And coming from the background I had, which involved abuse and like bullies and bad teachers and stuff, that was a dramatic counter narrative to my life as a 17-year-old. That put me on a path that I'm on today. It's been pretty beautiful since then.
It could have it could have gone one of two ways, right? It could have continued to spiral and been really bad, and it could have gone, you could not even be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. The things that happened later in my life, if those would have happened without the framework of faith and without the community of faith and without these other things, my life could
Yeah.
be.
How, you said you got kicked out of school. How did you get into a private Christian school then? Like, where's there must have been a shining light or an opportunity that someone said.
So my mom's father passes away and leaves an inheritance for my family who is not well-to-do.
Yeah.
Right as I'm getting kicked out of public school, and my parents have to use all of that to basically put aside to pay for my and my sister's private school education. So that's how it worked out. To me, it worked out really good because I had good teachers and a good learning environment, and good friends, families, and all that. But it must have been terrible for my parents who had finally gotten this opportunity to, buy a boat or something, and, and then have to like shove it aside for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty divine timing, and I was like, 200-pound sixth grader, and so when I was always big, head and shoulders bigger, taller than everyone, this big kid and emotional, and so I just kept getting into fights at school because I was a big target.
Sure.
And eventually, the 7th time I got suspended in 7th grade, the school board said you can't go back. And just to think about if that inheritance hadn't been there, and if that school hadn't been present, and all
you might have not even gone back to school anyway.
Could have been a high school dropout, junior high dropout, and be working at a garage, rebuilding engines right now.
Yeah.
Which is nothing wrong with that, but
Well, I mean, you could be a completely different path. Yeah. What were you passionate about growing up then?
Yeah, I was passionate about comic books, space.
Okay.
Mechanical stuff. Airplanes as a kid, and then I had 2,000 acres of state land that was around our house. We were on Route 1, Lot 1, Evans Road. You had to go into Mississippi and back into Alabama. The school bus wouldn't go there. The ambulance wouldn't go there. Like, it was literally in the middle of this white sand road in this, looks like Congo, type environment. Swamps, like bog.
That's awesome.
If you've never fallen into a bog, you've never quite lived.
Yeah.
And, it was this big swampy snake-infested place, and I would take off my shoes and go off into this 2,000-acre wood as a kid with my machete and duct-taped handle.
I had a blast.
And just have a blast.
Yeah.
And, dug out swim holes and lived out, all the little dollar classic literature books that the lady at the drugstore would give me when we'd go in. And just always liked adventure, had a world map wallpaper in my room, loved travel.
Yeah.
And it was weird to have the interest I had in the environment I had, because it wasn't the same interest of, my neighbors and neighborhood kids around me.
Yeah. So you go to, you get into this private school, you and your sister get in, and, your life kind of really takes a turn, and you just kind of start seeing life a little differently, seeing a lot more opportunity, and probably getting a lot more self-confidence. Yeah. Do you go to college from there, and is that kind of...
Yeah, so by my senior year, I'm on a track at the University of South Alabama, pre-enrolled as a mechanical engineer. I've got scholarship to Spring Hill and Auburn University in Alabama as a mechanical engineer. And then this whole God thing happens to me, and I tell my parents, hey, I'm not going to be an engineer. I'm so passionate about this change that I've experienced in my life. I think I want to, be a youth minister, because there's the youth minister at the school had taken interest in me, and so you can imagine how that went.
They're waiting on their investment to come back to them. Aren't they?
It's like, so you're going to go beg for money your whole life, and and be perpetually poor, and so that was a rough time in my house, but like my mom, I got to see her in the change that happened to me. She got to experience some of that change and come to faith, and my dad now too. And but the closest college that had a Bible track that was affiliated with the denomination of the school, which is Church of Christ, was a school called Faulkner University in Montgomery, Alabama. And I wrote to them and said, here's my ACT score. I got a 30 on the ACT. I've got 4.0 GPA. I had these scholarships. Would you guys consider giving me a scholarship for a Bible track? And I just wrote like a 2-pager on the fact I'd been kicked out of school, had this big conversion moment with God, and the leadership of that school gave me the equivalent percentage scholarship to come be a Bible major at this Christian school, which is another like miraculous turning point for me.
Right.
And so the Spring Hill University had given me the option to go to like a Jesuit training, and which would have been amazing. Now I'd been like, great. But at the time they were like, why don't you go to this, Protestant school, and we'll take care of you. And so it was great. And the same thing with that school. I had great teachers who took interest in me, and I've had these half dozen sort of parents in my life.
Yeah.
And, sort of pointed me towards a new normal that I can attribute a lot of my current like emotional maturity to.
Mm-hmm. During this whole time, you still like itching the scratch to just have that passion of mechanical engineering and like boats and just being a guy in general.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had my like GT Mustang, and I went down the whole Fast and Furious lane and had my souped up Honda that I put a turbo on, and
all the lights and everything.
Yeah, the under lights and hat on backwards, and I've always been, I always had side hustles. I was, working multiple jobs and managing a car dealership and doing landscaping and stuff while I did ministry as a profession too. And it was tough. As I got mentored and had these sort of theological role models in my life, I thought I need to get a PhD and I need to teach, and this is who I'll become in life. And after my first missions experience, I got down, and all of a sudden I was framing houses and pouring concrete and sleeping in the same hut as a work crew, and hanging out, splitting firewood. That's when I think the first sort of connection of where I came from and where I was going really meshed. And it was in Honduras in my sophomore year of college, and the worker crew would come to like the devotionals in the church, and I'd speak broken Spanish, and we'd laugh and cut up. And at the end of it, the missionary that was there said, "Hey, just so you know, those guys never come to anything. Like they come tolerate these groups that come. They never come to any of our services. Their wives do, but they don't. And it's amazing that these guys came to services and hung out with you. You've got something really special between you and these like blue collar relationships that are here." And that's like the first time I was like, well, of course I do. I grew up working in machine shops since I was 13. My family we speak the same language and have the same heart. And I'm awkward and clumsy, but I know how to swing a hammer and and work with my hands. And so I came back from that and asked if I'd go to Africa that same summer, and went to Kenya and did the same thing. Instead of staying with a group, I stayed in the homes of the people that we were serving. And then we tore down this big like dormitory and busted the foundation up and rebuilt it. And I just stayed and did my best to love and communicate with the people that were there at this center, and taught some of the church leaders and stuff. But the like sweat equity and that language of sweat so connected with people in like a labor work context that when I would start to speak about faith and theology, there was this other language that they could connect to. Because I grew up hoeing watermelon fields in South Alabama, and when you work with the dirt, you work with work with dirt, work with soil.
Respect.
And so I'd go out and get leeches on my ankles in the rice fields with people, and all that stuff was sort of second nature to me from where I'd grown up and living in swamps and swinging machetes and working on tractors. And so that was sort of the first mesh of this, upbringing and natural passions that I had, and this passion for ministry to me has just been saying thank you, because I was in an immense amount of emotional pain before I encountered God and Jesus, and I felt like a lead jacket of despair had been lifted off of me. And so I've spent the last 20 years trying to say thanks.
Give back.
And give back. So we went to, eventually, my wife and I got engaged in Kenya on a second trip, where after I stayed in refugee camps for 3 months, distributing food and blankets for the LRA crisis. Invisible Children had come out. A lot of people remember Joseph Kony and that. And I'd found out about that on my first trip and raised $7,000 or $8,000 on our school campus. Everybody came together. We had Dave Barnes and Gavin McGraw come on campus when they were just brand new at their little college. And I tried to give the money to the Invisible Children, this other nonprofit that worked in northern Uganda and DRC, and they told me, if you raise $8,000, you need to go, man. Like, you need to go do something. This is incredible. So I went to some of the churches that had supported us, and I asked, and they sent me. And so I went there and visited with some local missionaries, and then they sent me on buses to like the northern part of the country, and I'd buy these huge bags of beans and blankets, rent these trucks, go up with like rebels and machine gun fire, and then try to figure out how to distribute aid to refugees. And I'm 21. I lost 35 pounds. I'd sleep on the top of bags of corn going down dirt roads in Africa, and just completely fell in love with everything. And up to that point, I was sort of back on the American dream. I had my sports car, I had my Abercrombie clothes, I had my gym membership. And while I'm there in Africa, it was like, this is what you are meant for. Like the hardship you endured as a kid, your strength, like all your gifts, like this is what it's about. And just sleeping out there in the sun, in the heat of northern Uganda, I fell in love with Africa and fell in love with their people. And it was, I had people, like Museveni, the president at that time, was sending helicopter gunships up and just mowing everyone down because you couldn't tell rebel from normal person. And people that had their limbs removed with machetes, and their HIV had been spread through these camps. And so just sitting with people and having them share these stories with me, and just listening and saying, people care about you that you've never met. This is why I'm here. They sent me to help share. And it was really transformative for me. So I came back, sold my Mustang, bought a 2-door Saturn, and started wearing thrift store clothes. And my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, basically had this new man who would come back. And we went to Kenya together. I proposed to her there. She said yes, and said, we're moving to Africa, aren't we? And I was like, yes, can we please? And, so I finished a graduate degree in missiology, New Testament theology, which is like study of missions and culture, and how to teach in different cultures. And it's about worldview, all this really great learning, which helped unpack my Americanism, so that when I would go work in Africa, I could, to the best of my ability, sort of lay my Western American heritage down, understand and appreciate their, worldview from their cultures and languages, and then try to approach our beliefs as neutrally as possible. Right. So that we could get in and weigh into the things in Scripture, and leave as much as my, baggage behind, and allow them to really get into it themselves and develop their own songs and rhythms of faith that are within the bounds of Scripture, but may feel different to us here. It's like one of the things I always tell people is the word for communion in their language was bean cake and beer, and so it was like, perfect. Bean cake and beer it is. And so we'd have communion with bean cakes and beers, like local millet beer that they would make, and these bean cakes. And I wasn't going to import grape juice from America, and for us to have communion 3 hours away from the nearest paved road. So that was really great. So we got there in 2008 to Africa and Togo, this little French country, and we sold everything we owned. We used all my savings from selling our cars and stuff to put ourselves in the French language school in this little town called Albertville in the Savoie, France, which is great unless you don't have any money. So we bought like used bicycles and hitched rides on trains as much as we could, and kind of got to live in this beautiful place for 6 months to learn the French, the language of Togo. And then moved 7 hours from the capital up in the northern part of the country, in one of the hottest, most remote places in West Africa. our job was to take existing churches and try to help the leaders there figure out how to be self-sustaining. And so that was my passion for ministry, like it is with water, was how can we equip you to do this without needing missionaries, without needing Western aid? How can, I help you identify the resources you already have without having to bring them in from the outside? Within 3 months of getting there, I'd had malaria. It had crossed into my lungs. I was hospitalized, coughing up blood. They were trying to send me home. And just quickly realized that I was in a whole new environment.
Yeah, I get it. It got real.
It got real fast. And when you cough up blood at 27 years old, and you're in a hospital in Africa breathing out of a moldy respirator with a mason jar connected to your IV, it starts looking a lot like MASH, field hospital. And there was a doctor there that let me stay and didn't evacuate me. But that was sort of my first taste that this may be harder than anything I'd even experienced growing up, and doing the things I had in life. And I drank creek water my whole life. So when we were out in villages, I'd drink well water from their wells and eat food like they ate. And I was perpetually sick. And it was hard for me to sort of admit that I couldn't get used to it. And I thought the only reason they are alive is their bodies got used to it. And I was raised, my granddad always told me, if anybody can do it, you can do it. And so there's this sort of like, even to the biological level, if I just will myself,
my body will get over
my body will get over this and get used to it. And it never happened. We stayed in a village called Lhasa Cho. There was a husband and wife there that were pastoring a church, and we were trying to help just understand their problems and mentor them. And they couldn't have children, and when you can't have children in their context, the wife is literally seen as a child and doesn't have any value. And so if you think about like why you have kids in an agrarian society, it's so you have workforce, labor to go and expand and work your field, and children are a source of social status. And so they couldn't have kids, and there was all this pressure for them to divorce, for him to like find a new wife or have children through other means, through other women. And so they were getting real with us, and my wife and I would go stay in a tent for 3 weeks at a time in these villages, and so they were sharing with us her story, and we were like, well, there's a lot of other options other than divorce and hook up with somebody and have
who else is the next 10 or whatever.
And so they had extended family that had lost parents, that had children that were being raised by grandparents in a really rough and impoverished environment. Kids weren't able to go to school. So we connected them with a child sponsorship organization called Christian Relief Fund, and went and helped Jean-Marie and Christiane adopt a brother and sister named Deanne and Olivier. They were there. They started doing their schoolwork on the side of the hut, using chalk to do their math, and like we'd go out and they'd play in our tent, and life just seemed great. And so we were really just sort of on top of the world. Thinking we're here, we're getting to meet these wonderful people and get into community and life together. And 2.5 months, 3 months after they got adopted, John called me at night, which wasn't uncommon. We used to check in, and so I've got my Nokia brick phone, with the green screen, and the gummy number pad I can still feel, and we're like, he's in complete panic. And says, man, Olivier's sick. He's like not moving. So I said, I'll be right there. Where they're at, there's like tiny medical clinic that, this round building with, tin roof, and it's closed. And so we jump in my truck, like race to their village and get there. And Olivier's stiff as a board. He can't open his mouth. Lay him in the backseat of the truck. John's holding his head, like, tear to this hospital, get there, and then for the rest of the night we're running up and down the stairs of this hospital. If you need an antibiotic, you run down to the pharmacy and the antibiotic, you buy the antibiotic, you run it back up, you give it to the doctor, you have to find the nurse, then the nurse prescribes the medicine. So if you need an IV, you have to go buy the IV and the IV tubes and then run it back up, give it to, so nothing is like, it's all prepayment.
Yeah.
So the hospital doesn't get stuck with a bill for people that don't have addresses or money. There's no like subsidies at all. So we're doing that up and down the stairs, 3 a.m, we're running up and down getting stuff, and they're treating him, and we're like kept out of the room. There's this little 12 by 12 plexiglass window on this plywood door, and we're watching people go in and out. We have to get a respirator. We run down. There's one of these manual respirator units in the whole hospital, and get it, run back up, give it to the doctors. We're looking through the window, and we see the nurse look at her watch, put her hand on his chest, and then expel the last breaths out of this 9-year-old boy's lungs. And like that's the moment where like everything that had felt like it was building, for 10 years of being a believer, when life was making sense again, everything dissolved. And I can just remember there were grace, like feeling the world fall out from underneath us, and then immediately feeling all this weight of guilt and remorse and do-gooderism, and it's like, how are we? Like, what happened? What you're responsible for this? And John Marie and Christiane are there. They're deeply like, you think about their lives, so we're feeling this. They just had their first children after all these years of trying to have kids, and finally it looks like it's all going to work out. And then this son that they had just began to love, and have as their own, passes away. And John Marie and Christiane look to us and say, "It's from the water. It happens every year."
Yeah.
And they're like consoling us with this.
Like, this is normal.
Like, this is what happens,
Yeah.
man. Like, you're new here. Like, this
is
this is what happens. Like, 5 other kids already died this year.
Wow.
And so, like, we're sitting there now on this like wooden bench, head swimming, and I turned to Grace, and like I said that the hell if this is gonna happen anymore. And that's the only thing I knew to do. Was we have to fix and stop this. So immediately, like, dealing with pain, what do guys do? Try to fix something.
Yeah.
I thought, we can just drill a well. So the what he had was bacterial meningitis. Happens every year. And what happens is the one well that still works in the village that isn't dried up in the dry season is at their school. So all the kids come to this well, and they have these little like bags made out of inner tubes and wire that they let down with ropes. They lay those down, the kids pick them up, they put them to their mouths, they drink out of them. The rope falls on the ground in the mud, in the chicken feces and all that. They throw it back down in the well, and they fill it up. And there's only about 4 or 5 inches of water that's standing in the bottom of this thing.
Sure.
So you can just imagine how much like muck and germ and like viral load builds up with this small amount of water, and these 700 people using this one water source all at one time. And so if you're weak, young, elderly, have malaria or any other sort of like pre-existing condition, does this sound familiar?
Heard that enough.
Heard that enough lately.
6 months,
You're really vulnerable to being killed by it. So Olivia had died from bacterial meningitis, which was just sort of a common thing there. So my father had driven a well in our backyard in Alabama and put a hand pump on it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Kid you not. Like, we have this red hand pump, and you had to pour water in the top of it and get it primed, and you would pump water out of it, sort of like the old, ones you'd see here in Oklahoma in museums. And we had so many hurricanes, and because we were Route 1, Lot 1 Evans Road, whenever the wind blew, the power would be out. It would be out for us forever. Yeah. And so we couldn't flush toilets or take baths. And so we had this hand pump that would pump out red rusty water that we could flush toilets with and stuff when the hurricanes hit. And Dad had driven it in with a sledgehammer in this point. So I was like, Dad, how do we drill a well? Can you send pictures of that? There was another missionary in town who had been like trying to build stuff locally too. So me and this guy get together, find a local welder, and start building a drill kit for $70 to drill a well in Africa. So we use spring steel off cars. So we go to the junkyard, get spring steel, make these steel points with this hardened spring steel off the springs of a truck. Galvanized pipe parts, cast pulleys out of aluminum, get like braided rope made, throw up logs, make a derrick.
Okay.
So it's like a goalpost type thing with these logs, trees that we cut down that have Ys in the end of them. And we attach a rope over the pulley to the pipe. 12 guys are pulling 2 sticks like we're rowing boats, pulling this rope up and down. And then we get a little water in the hole to make some mud. And when the pipe goes down, this like valve we made would open. And when you lift up, the valve would close, the mud would rise, and when it would drop again, the mud would spray out the top. And so you were standing there with your hand valving mud as the crew lifted up and down on this pipe. And we drilled a 90-foot well in Lesotho in 10 days for $75.
Wow.
So we case it, we make a hand pump out of tire sidewalls, flip-flop, rebar, and half-inch pipe. And we're pumping water from a protected aquifer that we've backfilled. And now we've got, $100 invested in this, and $100 is what it would have taken to save Olivier's life.
When you look I spent $120 on a new car battery yesterday.
I know.
Right? Like, it's nothing.
It's nothing. Like, the lesson is like, I think that the problems that exist in the world, God has already equipped the solutions for those things around us. A village of 700 people can afford to drill their own well. They've just been told their whole life that they can't drill their own well, that there's not a means to drill their own well, that you have to wait for someone else to come and do it for you. And I just don't believe that's true. And we drilled 7 wells there that year.
In that town?
In that one village. And what I didn't want anyone to wait, and I knew these things were going to break. Because we made them out of tire sidewalls, flip-flops, and rebar. And we wanted there to be, when each one broke, we wanted to have time to fix them so that people didn't have to go back and drink the dirty water. One of the things about unsafe water is if you drink one glass of unsafe water, it undoes all the glasses of safe water that you've consumed.
Just one?
I mean, if it's got Shigella, Salmonella, E. coli,
it's still full of crap.
It's just full of crap, and once it gets in your body, it's going to multiply and undo all the good. Because safe water doesn't actually do good; it just doesn't do harm.
It just prevents.
And so if you drink one bad cup of water, it destroys everything else that's happened. So I have been in an organization. It's not one of these groups. It's like a well per 2,000 people. 2,000 people standing at something that pumps 3.5 gallons a minute is not. The sort of life that you want people to have.
Especially for some of these people are walking a long way to
They
get
already have
food.
so much stuff to do. You're like manually grinding your own food and working in fields and walking everywhere without cars. You don't want to have a 3-hour line for your, bucket of water. So we did that, seven wells in this one village. And to do a real quality borehole, $100 isn't.
Well, of course, but that's what got it started.
But that's what we got started with, and it was that idea of we don't need the $250,000 drilling rig. And the team of Canadian engineers
and a helicopter to fly
to come down, to come down and do this. We could actually do this with local people, and there's this huge labor force that want to learn new skills, that are curious, that are highly. Not ingenious, but have a lot of ingenuity. It's like MacGyver. Whenever you grow up without resources, you learn to do a lot with the resources you have. And that was my childhood too. And so I didn't even have a cordless drill. So we would heat up nails and fire and then punch holes in anything plastic or PVC with hot nails and a pair of pliers. And like I said, cast with aluminum and clay molds. I remember the first Water4 trip that they came, they were like, what do you need? What do you want? And I was like, man, if I could have a 9-volt cordless drill, it would save me so much time, They were like, sure,
just that,
but it's that low resource thinking breeds creativity and ingenuity in the right people. So we just saw it that way. So after that first year, I was Googling like how to drill manual wells with hand tools, because what we were doing was pretty brutal. Sometimes these pipes would shear off like 100 feet down, and you'd lose 10 days of work. The other thing it required was a lot of water, because you were having to keep this mud solution up. So people were carrying us all this water to drill wells for them. And there was this one school in Los Ocho where it all started, and the kids already had a hard time coming to school because you had to have at least a liter of water to come to school so that you wouldn't get dehydrated and distracted. Imagine, all you need is a liter. And the kids many days could not even get a liter of water to come to school, so they'd be turned away by the teachers to go home until they could get a liter of water to bring back so they could drink it. So those kids are bringing me 3 or 4 gallons each so that I can drill a well. And there's all these, from like bowls, like cereal bowls, to 6-gallon basins all over the well site when I get there at 6 in the morning. So these kids have walked miles and miles and miles for 3 and 4 a.m. to find a water source, filled up all these basins. And so the little 5-year-olds are bringing me cereal bowls of water that they've carried back to these big 4 and 5 gallon basins so that we can get a well in place. And
talk about motivation.
Oh yeah, I mean pressure. But yeah,
this has got to work.
This has got to work. And so we just knew there had to be a better way than what we were doing it. And so Water4 just launched a website, like it was this basic like white and blue website, and it had these 3 different links, and I clicked all of them. It was like, hey, I'm this guy in Togo. We're trying to drill wells, and we've got this great local teams that we've started. And I got an email back from like all 3 of them, and it was like the board chair, the like inventor who had invented the drill kit, and then the first executive director, and they were all like, yeah, man, we are here. What do you need? Tell us what you're doing. And 3 months from that first email, I had one of Water4's auger-based drill kits and 5 of their pumps in my hands. They had actually flown over and said, man, we'll spend 4 or 5 days with you, and let's drill a well together, and we'll leave the equipment for you to use behind. And that was sort of like the first match made in history. Water4 had this Apollo mentality of like, what do we have laying around us? What can we build with local materials? The tools are all built out of standard pipes and C-channels, iron and square tubing. I got their equipment, and the next 12 months we did 37 wells instead of 7, and then the next 12 months we did 100.
Okay.
So I mean, like in terms of like scale, capacity, using their equipment, it was, it still is. We still use it. It's slick. It's modular. It folds down. Instead of like 20 different tools, each one has like a different tip, like a screwdriver. It has like the multi-tip screwdriver sets. All the equipment was built with that type of mentality where you could just change the
plug it in,
ends, clip on, clip off the toolkits, and tripod that folded down, and sailboat winches that you could release fast with, and like all this sort of slick thinking with it. But we could fix it all with plow shears, plow disc, and steel spring steel, and keep everything working with local materials. And I came back my first trip, and Dick and Terry Greenlayer, the founders of Water4, and I told Dick, man, we drilled 100 wells this year. It's been the greatest thing ever. And Dick leans across the table and says, how many people are in Togo? I was like, around 7 million. He said, how long is it going to take you to get 7 million people safe water at 100 wells a year? And that was sort of my first real introduction to Water4, is I was looking for the accolades and the pat on the back.
And like, nice job, rookie.
He was like, congratulations. How are you going to do this at scale? And that's what I've loved in the last decade is Dick and Terry. Yes, it's about each individual life that's saved. It's about the fact that 5,000 kids die from dirty water. We talk about the coronavirus. The average death rate since it started has been a little less than 5,000 people. That's been going on every day with the water crisis. Since the start of time, probably, but at least since the 80s and 90s, we've been aware that 5,000 people are dying from this, every single day. And when you have a problem that large, you've got to expand your way of thinking about, the solutions. And we started finding really fast that as we got to 150, 200 wells, they were breaking. We had to go back and fix them. we needed this like post-installation solution put in place. And right about then, I've had like every waterborne illness known to Oregon Trail that could ever be conceived.
Yeah.
I've had malaria, a dozen times, 105 fevers, convulsions, been forced to sit in bathtubs of ice all day from fevers. And at this point, my body's a wreck. I'm like 300 pounds, just swollen, hurting all the time, and constantly sick. I wake up, we're going to install a hand pump at another school, and I can't straighten my fingers. My fingers look like an 80-year-old man with arthritis.
Yeah.
And knuckles are really swollen, eyes really red. So call the guys. I'm like, all right, I'm going to come out, but I may not be able to stay all day. There's something wrong with me. And I remember grabbing that pump, and the pumps are like 3-inch couplings on them, and I'm trying to hold that pump, and I cannot squeeze my hands around the 3-inch pump. And so 3 inches is like your Nalgene bottle, I couldn't even hold and squeeze that. And that's when I knew something was wrong, 'cause at first I thought maybe I just banged my hand with something hard yesterday, or maybe, I just really bruised my knuckles, not paying attention to what I was doing, because we're busting rock,
right.
And using sledgehammers and stuff. And that night, I lose vision in my left eye, and I can't straighten my knees and can't put weight on my toes because there's so much inflammation within them. It looks like I've got sprains, like massive instant sprains in my knees and feet. By the morning, I was in excruciating, like horrific pain. I'd lost sight, and my wife doesn't know how to drive our 5-speed truck.
Because it's a stick.
Because it's a stick, you know? And so we're like,
well,
hey, I've got this Australian buddy, and I'm like, hey, Andrew, would you mind taking me to the hospital, which is 7.5 hours away? There's this American doctor at this one hospital, and we thought, let's try to get down to there. And
it's like going to Houston for a hospital,
it's like going to Houston for that's your trip.
But also like not on a highway.
But not on a highway.
Right.
And then he shows up at like 5 p.m, and he sees me, and it's like, oh, this is bad.
Why didn't you say
why didn't you say
something?
so? Because I'm a guy from Alabama.
Of course.
So we have to drive down at night, and like people block the roads with trees and steal your cars, and so we're literally driving through these jungle roads down to this hospital at threat of being taken over, and get to the hospital. It put me in a wheelchair at this point. I can't stand and walk on my own. Roll me up to this American doctor who's waking up in the middle of the night, looks at me and says, we don't want to treat you here. Because now you've got an American who's on the edge of catastrophe in their hospital. And he said, we just need to get you out of here. And I said, I don't have evacuation insurance. I need you to fix me and take care of me here. So Dr. Briggs is this guy's name. He's this awesome, doctor from Michigan, and he says, does anyone in your family have ankylosing spondylitis, which is this type of arthritis that is genetic, passed on? And I said, yeah. He said, well, based on what the condition you're in and how fast it's set, and this like gnarly rash thing that got on my knee, he said, you have got some serious arthritis reaction happening in your body. We're going to try to take care of you. My pulse was erratic. I was bleeding internally. My optical muscles had cut off blood flow to my eyes, so I had lost blood flow and circulation to my eyes.
How old are you at this point?
So this happened in 2011, so I'm...
So very recent.
28.
Wow.
They have to put tubes in my knees because they're afraid the muscles are tearing in my joints because the inflammation has happened so fast and it's so extreme. They pack me with bags of ice. They find out I have cerebral malaria. They do 5 malarial treatments to try to get that out. I have Shigella, E. coli, Salmonella while I'm there, all at the same time in the hospital. The pain levels are so high that I go into shock when I'm not on Demerol and morphine. And so they give me Demerol, they give me morphine, and then that time between, if you ever had to survive on pain meds, that time between, I'm just like hyperventilating for an hour, waiting for the nurse to come back in and give me that shot of Demerol again, because the joint pain in all my major connective tissue areas is so high. There's 30 drugs a day that I'm taking. My wife has it all laid out on a coffee table, and I'm just cycling through all these different inflammatory meds, 160 milligrams of prednisone, which if you've ever had to take prednisone, it's like 16 times the maximum dosage you'd ever give somebody. And so I'm there in a bed in Africa, and the doctor's telling my wife, you need to be prepared for him not to make it out of here. You need to, what plans do you have? Do you guys have a will? You know, these sort of things.
Having serious conversations
with my wife while I'm there. And I'm like out, but still there.
But what's happening.
Listen to these things. And, you know, it's like seriously touch and go.
28
years old, looking at losing my life in Africa. I'm there a month in this hospital. And at the end of a month, I have these like beautiful encounters with God again, or like I hear him like promise that I will recover, that I will be healed. There's this like huge, and like the pain was like removed from my knee in this one big encounter where I like literally heard God say Father, Son, and Spirit, pull this pain out of my body. And you can even hear me saying it. I'm cynical about everything. I'm the most like scientific redneck guy ever. And there's this like powerful encounters that I'm having, both from the time I'm 17, up to now.
The kind of encounters that if somebody else told you this, you'd be like,
totally.
Whatever. But because you've had it yourself, you're like, I'm like, this is.
And every time of hardship, I'm like, yes, I know you sound crazy to yourself even, but you know this happened, Matt. And it was one of those moments where I almost felt like it was like being saved again through the pain. And so I was having to cling to God for life and for breath, and I had this huge peace. And the other thing that this moment of awareness, I hear all these people howling in pain outside of my room. And so it's a screen door, no air conditioning, vinyl mattress, it's all cracked, cutting you in the back, the camp mattress thing. Same mason jar IV tubes, but I'm hearing these people wail and suffer, and I'm seeing these people sit outside on the sidewalk who don't have, the 8x5 room that I'm in. And
it's gone. It's no big deal.
And just realize how incredibly lucky I am to have something to fall back on. How incredibly lucky I am to have, enough resources to buy the medicine that I need. And I suddenly realized in a world of billions of people that I was not on the top of the priority list in the universe, and I just needed to be very patient about God's timing for healing and recovery. So at the end of that month, my pain levels suddenly sort of like drop manageable, where I can use a walker and stand up. And the doctor says, you need to get on an airplane and you need to get to America, like now. So Water4 calls and says, hey man, here you're in a tough spot. Is there anything we can do? And I said, you could get me back to America right now. It'd be really good, like right now. So they do. So the executive director, says, we'll book you, British Air flight, get you a bulkhead seat and get you home. And so wheelchaired me to the hospital, got me back to America. We get back here and realize that I have no insurance, no house, no car, no savings. We sold everything we owned and moved to Africa. And I'm 27. Why would I need insurance? And nobody will see me. We go to like the free healthcare clinics, and they're just totally like, we have a childhood rheumatologist that can see you in 60 days. I've got a suitcase full of Demerol that the hospital in Togo's giving me, and I'm thinking, how much Tylenol 4s and Demerol do I have left to get to this point? Terrible pain still. This rheumatologist in Mobile, Dr. Myers, we call him. He says, I'll see you, but it's going to be $5,000 to do the first test. We have a credit card. I say, we've got $5,000 credit card limit. Sign us up. Like, I'm dying. I can't do this. I can't mentally continue to be in this amount of pain. And so we show up to the doctor, and my wife, who's like, $110, blonde, is pushing me now, like a 310-pound sea monster in a wheelchair. Just all curled up, can't extend my fingers, can't see, can't stand. And when he sees my wife pushing me, he opens a door to talk to the nurse right as we're walking in. this guy has compassion on our situation.
Yeah.
Does the test, gives me the sheet at the end of it, and it says no charge at the top of it. For 16 weeks, this guy saw us.
That's so good.
Tested us, gave me the medicine for free.
Yeah.
Very quietly about it all.
Yeah.
Never asked for anything. And at the 16 weeks, he looked at me and said, Matt, you're going to mentally break if you continue to fight this. You are going to be disabled. You're going to be confined to a bed. You're not going to be able to work anymore. You need to face that. That's not something I can still compute, much less compute then.
Yeah.
I tell him, like, I can't, if I give up, I'll give up.
Yeah.
You know, like, I can't do this. He says there's one other thing we could try, but it's $3,200 a month, and I only have 2 samples, and I can't give it to you after that. So it's this drug called Humira. He pulls them out of a cooler. I've been taking these neon yellow cancer drugs up till then to try to suppress my immune system. A drug called methotrexate. It's a real high dose of it that they were giving me to try to get my immune system to rattle down. Turns out I have 17 autoimmune disorders.
Yeah.
And the illnesses in Africa, the malaria, the waterborne illness, sort of like broke the dam on all these latent autoimmune things that were there. And they all came out at once because there was such a horrific immune system load that's there. So they're trying to suppress all these immune issues now with these immunosuppressant drugs. Gives me the Humira, says, warm it up in your hands when you get home, give yourself a shot. I'll see you next week, see how you're going. That next morning, for the first time in nearly 6 months, I sat up in bed on my own and had my feet on the floor on my own.
How did that feel?
I woke my wife up.
You're dreaming?
Yeah, absolutely think I'm dreaming. I mean, I can't even go to the bathroom on my own up till this. So I'm like sitting up in bed. I'm like shaking my wife, We're in another of the 14 garage basement homes that we'd stayed in up till then. And I said, I'm sitting up on my own. And she's like, how did you do that? And are you okay? And did you fall over? And she's not slept in 6 months, you know. And that day I went from wheelchair to walker. By the 3rd day, I remember sliding into the booth at like an Applebee's just using a cane.
Yeah.
And so I had and by the 4th day, I'm just walking just with a cane sort of as backup.
Yeah.
Muscles have atrophied, super weak, but I can extend my joints. I can hold a glass of tea in my hand. I can hold a fork and put food, in my mouth by myself. And this Humira anti-inflammatory drug shut down this immune response to a level that I could start to functioning. So we go back to the doctor, and he's like
sprinting in the door.
Yeah, I'm like walking in the door with this cane, and he says, you know, maybe you're going to make it after all, Matt.
Yeah.
So from there, I was back on the track. So that was in November 11th that I get that shot. January 20th, I'm back on an airplane headed to Africa.
Yeah. Just like, right, I'm ready to go.
Still on, 30 drugs. They have to taper me off of this stuff for 6 months. We get back to Africa. They drilled 30-something wells while I was gone.
Yeah. Just them on their own?
Just them on their own.
Yeah.
The teams that I'd started. I came back. They wanted to give me the project back to manage. And I said, guys, you have done everything that I ever dreamed would happen from this. They'd planted 8 churches on their own without my help at all. They drilled, 35 wells. And I just said, I'll be here and I'll shadow you guys for 18 months. But after that, it's going to hurt you for me to stay, and we're going to move on. So Water4 had hired me there while I was sick. Before I got the medicine, they hired me so that I could hopefully have health insurance. The board chair says, you think God's going to heal you, don't you? I said, yeah, I know he will. And he said, well, when do you want to start? We'll get you some insurance, and hopefully, you can get going. So I was their guy. I did nailed my ear to the door. I was, Water4 property at that point.
Yeah.
And that meant that $3,000 drug was now covered by insurance. And so I was able to continue after that month samples, get my own, continue taking it. And stuff at Water4 is, grown and flourished and scaled from there.
So 2013, you go back.
Go back in
and
13.
And then grow it till probably since when I saw you would have been like.
So actually, 2012 we moved back, and then they asked me to do what we were doing in Togo around the world.
Got you.
And so we moved back from Africa to the U.S. in 2013. We live in a log cabin in Yukon at Sod by Sherry, and then buy a house in South Guthrie where we are today. So that's been like the big story.
Have you written a book yet?
Haven't written a book yet.
That has to be on the
no one has time for this, but at some point, the other thing that's happened is I ran a half marathon in 2013. I tapered off the drugs, and I took a motorcycle trip across America, which I meant to just be a motorcycle trip. I ended up hiking Half Dome, hiking to a bristle cone in Great Basin, and then walked out on Plateau Point in Grand Canyon, out and back at 307 pounds on all these drugs, told that I shouldn't walk more than the distance of a Walmart, and started running up and down a quarter-mile driveway at Sod by Sherry, and that was as far as I could run. From July to the Route 66 marathon, I ran at my first half marathon, and then have been pushing and fighting these inflammatory conditions for the last 7 years, to the point where last year, I ran across the Grand Canyon and back twice, which is 50 miles. All rim to rim to rim.
Yeah.
I did my first triathlon, 2 marathons, and then an alpine ultra marathon, up above the tree line the whole way. It was a 28-miler. And this year, had to do my own self-supported, Ironman 70.3, a half-distance Ironman.
Which I saw you had your daughter was out there right at the checkpoint. Your wife's out there helping you out. And
my daughter showed up with signs and potatoes, cool. And I've lost 120 pounds. And since then we had two girls. The cancer drugs I was on would not allow us to have children. Sure. We'd been trying to have kids for 10 years and hadn't been able to. And part of the miracles was us having kids and me having this new hope of life. And this year I'm hoping to run Mount Hood twice. So it's an 80-mile double loop, 20,000 feet of elevation, and to go from being in a wheelchair and told that it would never work out, to being a kid that was told, he was too bad, too rough to be a part of the school system. And there's been a lot of these moments in my life where it wasn't supposed to work out, but to have had this divine mercy and grace extended to me where it has worked out, and worked out more than I could have imagined. It's been really, really beautiful. So Water4, we just finished our 6,000th water project. We've served close to 1.6 million people. So I was proud of 100 wells. We've done 6,000. We're about to finish our first entire county where no one in an entire county of 100,000 people, every home, school, and clinic has access to safe water. There's nowhere you can go in the county and not have access to safe water.
That's so good. So
not just your village, but anywhere you go. We're trying to do that in 20 other districts along with our other work in the next 10 years. And our goal is to serve 7 million people by 2030 through what we're doing. So just huge opportunities. And all of it comes back to water, you know, and it comes back from me. Where do you think I got Shigella, Salmonella, and E. coli? The water that I was drinking in communities. Where did Olivier die from? The water in those communities. And even though it stinks to be sick, it's a really huge daily reminder that there's 2 billion people that don't have safe water in the world. 2 billion people. And so I am one of 2.1 billion people that face the repercussions of dirty water, unsafe water every day in their lives, and we get to do something about it at Water4, and I get to be a part of a job that I couldn't imagine being more passionate about every day.
Nobody's going to question your motivation after listening to this.
Some personal connections to it. I want to get the Water4 logo tattoo, but maybe going too far. But it's great. We one of the things I wanted to share too is last year we had our Walk for Water. This is this event that Water4 has, and I hope some of you guys that are listening would consider coming out on September 19th. And at Scissortail Park, we actually have people carry an empty bucket of water almost a mile and a half, like 1.3 miles, and then carry a full bucket of water 1.3
like a gallon,
miles back. It's a 5-gallon bucket.
5 gallon, like your Lowe's bucket.
So you can put as much water in as you want.
Yeah.
People in Africa are carrying 40 pounds.
Yeah.
So it's heavy when it's full. So like last year, most people carried around 2 gallons in it. But to like experience hauling that water, even just a mile and a half, which the average distance is 3 miles, is a really tangible experience that you and your family get to go do together. And we have stories lined up at each loop you do. It's like it talks about the global crisis, the country crisis, the personal crisis, and then the solutions around it. And I don't want everyone to go to Africa and get sick like I did, so that they can connect with it.
Don't listen to your granddad.
Our event's really a good way to come out and connect with this walk that everyone's doing every day around the world to get water. And unfortunately, most of those people are walking that distance for water that's making them sick. Because there's no other option.
Well, and the fact of walking, carrying that water, and making all of it still and keeping the bucket till the end. That's hard enough.
Yeah, and you're burning calories that you not even getting to use because you have diarrheal disease. So even the little bit of food you're eating is not being absorbed into your body because you have diarrheal disease from the dirty water that you're consuming. So this like cycle, imagine every day waking up, roosters crowing, sun's about to rise, and thinking, I have to walk 3 miles, carry 40 pounds of water back, and do that for my family of 7. And just a constant drain. And then imagine having a tap 50 meters outside your house that has safe, treated water in it, where you just spin a top and fill up your bucket and carry it back. Like, it's incomprehensible, the weight of life that gets lifted with the work that we do. And so we want people to come out, hear about that, and be a part of it. And we're Oklahoma City based, Oklahoma City rooted, and are working around the world. And most people don't know that we're here on 10th and Villa, next to the subwoofer shop, rim shop, on and fairgrounds. And we're creating technology and working with 500 African entrepreneurs that we've been able to launch and scale into these huge water businesses around the continent.
It's just amazing, isn't it? Like, I'm sure it is very overwhelming at times. But like you said, that you're in this, you've been doing this, and now you're in charge of this and seeing how it works. And because you have this upbringing of growing up in Alabama and just figuring things out, all these little things in life that's happened to you that put you to where you are now, everything is just adding your experience. And you can just going from like being able to relate to people when you go on a mission trip when you're in college or high school, whatever it is, because you're just good with your hands and they understand grafting and hard work. And now to like building wells, and it's
to like have been able to be a well driller, which is what I was, to being able to drive the organization, and grow us to have this multi-million person impact is just really great. When the board asked me to be a CEO, I said, I feel like the guy that was asked to go cut down a tree, and then they had to like split the tree into lumber, to build a boat, to like get it out in the water, and then say, and can you captain it? And that's been the sort of beauty for me, is I've been able to be a part of this ground up transformation in Water4, and then be able to lead all these amazing people and lead from their vision and their relationships with me. It's been incredible.
And everything, like, you can kind of trace back to like getting kicked out of school and getting your granddad passing and getting this inheritance and going just some timing, divine timing, and you go to private school and you have an experience there, somebody actually cares about you. Right? Like, some people, like, schooling has such an impact on everybody, and now you've turned out to become like this, the CEO of this huge water company that's impacting millions around the world.
It doesn't take much when people are in hard environments. It doesn't take a whole lot of good to make a huge impact on them. And I hope everybody realizes that, especially right now when we're all anxious and having a hard day, like smiling with your eyes while you're wearing your mask in Walmart, and especially putting your arm around a young kid and taking interest in their lives, it can put them on a trajectory like mine today.
So the walk is on the 19th of September.
19th of September at Scissortail Park.
Yeah.
So we don't know what's going to happen.
Sure.
So it's a huge park. It's outdoor. We're going to be providing masks and hand washing. And what we hope is that we have, anywhere up to 1,000 people there.
Yeah.
But we'll be able to space a park because Scissortail is huge. And then walk, collect water, carry the bucket, have the story. If the COVID-19 situation doesn't work out and we're not able to gather, and even if it does, we have a walk where you are component. That's like a digital package. So it's like the virtual type walk where you can go with your family, your subdivision, or get together with your neighbors and do it, and still learn and look at the picture slides on your phone and do the walk. And we can provide the buckets for you and all the information. But it's Water4's way of like trying to connect people here with what the rest of the world's doing. And right now, we're tired of feeling stuck at home and feeling like we're trapped, and we think it's going to be a really good thing for people to be able to get out and practically do and change the sort of narrative and bring some hope, because we are doing something about it and we are ending it. Yeah.
And so it's websites on a nice screen behind you. So water4.org /walk for that, and then obviously Water4 with the number 4.org, and then obviously on Water4 on all social media as well, I assume.
Thanks. Yeah.
And everything there as well. So,
Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and we'd love it if everyone would come out and walk, check out the website and register, and be a part of that with us.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
This podcast was presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, who've been telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com and definitely on Instagram at oklahomahof. Catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.